Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today we're going to be talking about the Bomberman Ziggs composition. It's kind of like a new Hyper Roll Rebels comp that has been popping up since the update, especially now that Ziggs is down to 40 mana. First of all, thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. The link in the description below. Feel free to check it out. Let's talk about the Ziggs comp then. And it's really, really easy. Honestly, it doesn't take much to actually to play this comp. You want to play primarily a Rebels start. So usually something like Malphite and Ziggs to begin with. And then you want to have any other Rebel, be it Yasuo, Yi, Sona, whatever, right? Your focus is picking up as many Ziggs and Malphites as physically possible, as well as benching other rebels like Yi and Yasuo whilst you can. Your absolute priority of this composition should be economy until the Krug round. Like any Hyper Roll composition, you do not level up and you get as much gold as you can before the Krug rounds. And if that means losing a lot, so be it. Another thing that I think you should be very well aware of is that you should at least have 2 tiers by the first carousel. So if you lose the first few rounds to get carousel priority, you want to get at least 2 tiers. The reason I say that is that it's absolutely integral for the success of this composition for you to have 2 Seraphs on Ziggs. It can work with just 1 Seraphs, but what I will tell you is that you need to go and find Gangplank as soon as physically possible and put him in your comp with some good items if you want to work with just 1 Seraphs. So when you get to the Krugs, what you're going to be is you're going to be level 4. Usually you'll be running with just some random rebels, so probably like a Yasuo or something, right? After the Krug round, you're going to roll down and you want Malphite 3 and you want Ziggs 3, and then you want to have whatever else you can in terms of rebels, and then you're just going to stick another rebel on probably. Most people just end up having like something like this where they've got like these rebels, and then you've got the Ziggs as well. At level 6, you're going to be a bit behind people in terms of leveling, so it might be less likely that you find a Jinx, but ideally you find a Jinx at level 6 and you've got 6 rebels, and if you can get an item on her like an Infinity Edge or something, great. That's also great. What I'd recommend for Malphite is he takes a lot of your defensive items, but I often find with any 3 star, like just putting on a Zerot portal is always a nice thing because it gains power with levels, and I like that, especially on someone like Malphite. So your comp will end up looking something like this. Obviously, you might position it somewhere else, like say for instance, you position like here, for instance, like this, and then you put the the Jinx gets some more, or you do something like this. But to be honest with you, it's probably best to make Ziggs your main focus for the Rebel comp because he's the one that's going to be doing a lot of damage. And then you can put like a Rabadon's Death Cap on him or something like that. Rabadon's would really help. Rabadon's does make this a lot stronger. This is like the perfect items for Ziggs. I've used it with a Jeweled Gauntlet before, and you're going to see that in this video in a moment. But after you hit Ziggs, now ideally, you're going to hit Ziggs before you hit 0 gold when you roll down. If you hit Ziggs first and you're close to Malphite, stop and then start to economy back. You need to get back to 50 gold, and then you need to go essentially to 8 or level 8 as quickly as possible. Because what you're going to do is you need to find Gangplank. Gangplank massively improves this composition's overall power. So you throw the Gangplank in, and you also want Miss Fortune as well if you can get her, because Miss Fortune gives you the blaster bonus for your what's it called, for your Jinx. Okay, so you'll end up with something looking, something like this. Maybe you get a QSS, and then you want to transfer any kind of like remaining items that make Gangplank good onto Gangplank. So most people end up with something like this on Gangplank, and that's like perfect. And this is like your level 8 composition, right? This is what you want it to be. There's no other major changes that you'll want. You can put a random blaster in for Miss Fortune if you really want to. You could put a space pirate in for some gold if you found Gangplank. But this is what you want your composition to look like at the end of the day. It should just be essentially eco up once you find Ziggs 3 and you find Malphite 3, and then you're going for level 8 to find Gangplank and hopefully Miss Fortune. Especially if you can get a QSS on Miss Fortune in the corner as well. It just means that the hooks coming through from Blitzcranks and stuff won't be so annoying to deal with. And this is what this composition is supposed to look like at this level. Now, it can vary wildly, but the core is just the 6 rebels with the 3-star Ziggs. You need 2 Seraphs to really make this work. If you don't find 2 Seraphs, then you're in a bit of a rubbish spot. But yeah, this is a good composition if you find the 2 Zeraphs and if you have Ziggs and Malphites to begin with. Because if you don't find any Ziggs and Malphites, you're going to end up using all of your economy to find them, and you might not even get them to 3-star on the first roll down, and then you're basically screwed because you need to get back to level 8 for this comp. It's not like the Xayah comp where you've got legs even if you're level 6 and 7. If you do not find Gangplank in this composition, or like a demo spat Aurelian Soul, for instance, so something that you'll see me do in this game that I'm going to show you is that I get an Aurelian Soul, and I don't even have a Gangplank. Like, I don't even have a Gangplank. I have an Aurelian Soul with, I think it was like Rabadons and Demo Spat, right? And then I think I just had, I can't remember what else I had, but this was also another way I made this work, right? So you just need to be aware that, that this is not a comp like Xayah or Candyland where they just suddenly starts like carrying you for the rest of the game, or the previous Candyland anyway. You do need to really think about your economy after you roll down, because it is important that you go and find your legendaries, because if you don't find your legendaries, you kind of lose a bit of steam in the late game, which is one of the problems with this composition. Cool. Okay, guys, unfortunately, I only started recording this just after my roll down. But what you can see here is I'm essentially just rolling and trying to pick up my Ziggs, and I already have the Malphite here. So we're now at 3-3 with a Ziggs 3 and a Malphite 3. We have 1 Seraphs, but obviously we're looking to get our second as the game progresses. But we're in a good spot. Like, basically 1 Seraphs is a good enough space for me to say it's quite likely that I'm going to find the Seraphs that I need. And, you know, you've seen, like, that Ziggs 3 does do a lot of damage. And I have the Z-Rock portal on my Malphite too, which is great. So on this carousel, I had a really good early game. As you can see, my early game was pretty solid. But I am looking for the tier if I can get it. So the tier would be my absolute priority right here, because that means I'm just 1 tier away from finding Ziggs' double Seraphs, and then we're in a good spot. So we're looking for 1 tier extra here. Like I said, I'm sorry that I didn't show you the early game. I just forgot to start recording, but I did really want to show what this composition can do if you have the right setup for it. So let me just explain what I did in the early game. As you can see, I basically just hoarded Rebels. I actually found a very early Master Yi 2, and Master Yi 2 is pretty strong, pretty good carry, and I had a Ziggs 2 as well with Seraphs, and a Ziggs 2 with Seraphs was a good way to prevent losing a huge amount of HP, so I actually had a really, really good start to the early game. But you're seeing, like, without double Seraphs, we're not just, like, automatically winning every round like we were with, you know, things like Shredder, and you know, if you hit the right items with Shredder and you hit the right items with Candyland, you would just hit, like, every you know, you'd win every round until you sort of ran out of steam and started needing to level up. This build, if you don't have the double Seraphs, like, you're not gonna just constantly win at level 5. This is not a comp that just gonna start monstering people at level 5. It's a comp that is super strong and scales really well, but you need to have the economy input to scale it. Which is obviously going to be an issue for a lot of people, because sometimes you're not going to find those Ziggs in the roll down, and that's going to be a massive problem for you. But you can see here that I'm essentially just looking to save as much HP, save as much gold as possible. I'm also keeping the Yasuos, because I'm only 4 Yasuos away from a Yasuo 3, and you know, the more 3 stars the better in this scenario. And I do actually end up finding the double Seraphs, and I decided to go for the Jeweled Gauntlet here as well. Not because, I mean, Jeweled Gauntlet I think is worse as an individual item than Rabadons in this case, because obviously my crit chance with double Seraphs is going to be much lower. But, you know, if I do crit, it's a lot of damage. You know, I'm going to have a huge damage coming from my Ziggs. But at this point, it's just Ziggs throwing bombs. His animation is a bit janky, to be honest with you. And even with the double Seraphs, we're still losing to things like Kale, because it's just the Ziggs animation is a bit janky, and he doesn't have the power of something like a 3-star Xayah to just mince through everybody. It takes a while for Ziggs to start having his impact. The real power of Ziggs comes when you have the Gangplank later on, or you have a demo spat, and you know, he starts stunning everybody that he's hitting as well. So it's not just about the fact that he's dealing damage, it's about that, you know, you want to start stunning people as well. So what I can recommend is, I think 6 Rebels is what you want to go for at level 6, but if you can't find 6 Rebels, you can put a Rumble in, for instance. You know, if you find a Rumble, just put him in there. And that's, you know, that's a good spot to be in. I decided to level up to 6 a little bit early here because I have another 2-star Yasuo to put in. You know, and actually, I'm close to a 3-star Yasuo here. So a 3-star Yasuo is like a really big upgrade. Because I can start putting items on him, and he can be like a secondary carry in my Rebel comp. So that's why I'm interested in using the 2-star. The sort of interested in going for the 3-star Yasuo, because I think it's a pretty solid upgrade for me. In terms of itemization here, I think essentially you're just trying to plan for GP at this point. So I'm just looking for anything that could be useful for Gangplank, or anything that might be able to add to my defensive on my Malphite. So I'm just looking for things like GP items. So I was looking for a potential Morellonomicon down the line. So obviously Morello's is a good item. Another death cap would be a really nice item for GP down the line. So I'm just trying to plan now that I've got my items on my Ziggs to go for my GP or for my whatever items that I'm going to put down. Jinx, Aurelion Soul, whatever, all of them are perfectly okay. And you can see, now that we've hit level 6, we are starting to do some good work. We've got a bit more around Ziggs. He's got a lot of shielding. We've got 2 Yasuos who are providing a lot of CC as well. Something that isn't really talked about with Yasuo is just the kind of the CC that he provides your team. But you can see that I'm just assessing like what items I can use and when I should be using them. If I find a 3-star Yasuo, I'm obviously going to just start slamming items on him because, he acts as a secondary carry. Which is important. And you can see here, like, obviously we're not 8s. We haven't been able to fast 8 this game. A lot of people who fast 8, they go for fast 8 at around 4-1, whereas we're still 6 and we're still looking to build an economy to go to 8. So we're missing out on Gangplank. There's a guy already here with a Gangplank too. This is not a good spot for me to be in as a Ziggs Bomberman player because essentially we're in the shitter. The reason we're in the shitter is because we're probably not going to get a Gangplank. A lot of the Gangplanks have already gone. So what I've decided to do in this particular instance is roll down and look for Jinx for 6 rebels, obviously, which I don't find. But I'm also adding in a demo spat for my Vel'Koz. The Vel'Koz will be an intermediary demo spat holder until I either find a Gangplank or an Aurelion Soul. I'm keeping hold of the Nico's Help because I'd like that Nico's Help to go on either my Gangplank or my Aurelion Soul. And with my 3-star Yasuo, I decided to just say, hey, let's just combine items. Interestingly enough, I actually quite like Runans with the Bloodthirster. The reason being is that those little bolts actually contribute to the lifesteal. And also Yasuo on his ultimate applies basic hit effects, which means he's going to be using those bolts from the Runans, applying basic hit effects as well, which I think is really funny. I just think it's a nice little addition. So yeah, Yasuo with those items I think is a perfectly good carry. I mean, I don't think they're optimal or anything, but they're pretty solid nonetheless. But yes, of course, we're going for the demo spat. Vel'Koz here, he's going to buy me a lot of time. He's going to be a really, really strong mid-game demo spat holder if he ever casts. But also, it's important for my Ziggs. My Ziggs is just going to start stunning people. So every time he uses his ability, he's going to stun them. And with Seraphs, that means he's basically stunning every time he casts, or every second, or whatever it is. It's really strong. Rebel spat would have been amazing here. So if I got the Rebel item in this scenario, I would have been really happy, but the Blaster Brawler player decided to go for it. So I thought the best case scenario for me right now was to go for the Frozen Heart, because I was against a lot of Blaster Brawler players, and I was against a lot of Kale players as well. So I just thought that the Frozen Heart on my Malphite, who's quite tanky, anyway, is a pretty good way to just slow down some of the Blaster Brawler players and slow down some of the KL players too. And what I'm scouting for here, the way I'm just looking through all the boards, I'm looking for where Shroud of Stillnesses are positioned, I'm looking for where Blitzcranks are positioned, and I'm just trying to make it so that I kind of dodge any of the obvious ones. If there's like loads on the left hand side, I move my comp over to the right hand side. If there's loads on the right hand side, I stay on the left hand side, etc, etc. So now I'm looking to go to level 8. The reason I want to go to level 8 is obviously to find Gangplank. I don't think I'm going to I don't think it's likely that I find a Gangplank. Neither is it 100% necessary because I have the demo spat already. So actually, another good thing for me to consider would be to go for an Aurelion Soul. I have a Rabadon's and I have a demo spat, and a demo spat Aurelion Soul is really strong. So, I think an Aurelion Soul is something worth considering for me, and I talked about it in the build guide video where I just said, Aurelion Soul is a good choice. I also have another GA here. I have a Hextech Gunblade, which is, I think, a decent Aurelion Soul item because it's going to heal him as he goes round. And also I have Ludens, which is pretty good. I can put that on the Vel'Koz, for instance. So all of those items are like perfectly solid, and I think also the GA is pretty good for Master Yi, for instance. So there's the Jinx. I add the Jinx just for the pure 6 rebels. You know, and she can hold my GA if I really wanted to, but the reason they don't give her the GA is because she's level 1. And there's a lot of Blaster Brawler players in the lobby, and I just don't think it's likely that I find her. So this is versus Shredder. And again, the Yasuo is doing a lot of the Yasuo is doing like insanely good work for me here. He's just like really holding up a lot of people. Unfortunately, Shredder is still really strong, and I just can't burst through the front line quick enough. You know, I thought they nerfed that build. They apparently didn't. But again, I want to be on the opposite side to a lot of these builds as well, because it just means that my Ziggs gets targeted too quickly. A little positioning thing that you should be aware of is that if you're on the same side as the enemy carries, and your carry is on the direct same side, it's very likely that the enemy carry is going to focus your carry sooner rather than later. Whereas, you know, I'm playing versus this KL carry, didn't actually touch my Ziggs for the entire time. So something to remember is if you're directly opposite the enemy carries, the enemy carry is more likely than not going to focus you. And actually, you see me pick up the Aurelian Soul here. Now, I don't actually make the switch from the Vel'Koz to the Aurelian Soul just yet. The reason being is because I want an Aurelian Soul 2 to really make that switch. I'm losing real hard to this player. He's got a GP2 and an NF2 as well. So unfortunately, I just take a huge hit here. In terms of what I'm going to aim for, the Morellos would be preferable, but I don't get it. The second preferential item would be the Jeweled Gauntlet, which would go on to the Aurelian Soul to allow him to have the chance to crit as well. And I find the Aurelian Soul, and I immediately copy him, and I think, okay, now this is the time I'm going to sell the Vel'Koz. So I sell the Vel'Koz, I put the items on the Aurelian Soul. The rest of the items are going to go on my Master Yi. I think I put a GA on my Master Yi, and I give the rest of the items over to Master Yi here, because they're not bad items for Master Yi at the end of the day. And now Aurelian Soul 2 with Demo Spat, it's going to be much, much more effective at dealing with the enemy boards. So I end up knocking out a couple of people, which is really good. And we got ourselves down to a top 2 situation. And versus the other GP player. And you know, I think I'm strong enough to be able to beat him. I decide to make them my Aurelian Soul the kind of the main focus, and splitting some of the rebels between my my Ziggs and my Aurelian Soul. And as you see, we end up winning. Aurelian Soul manages to carry me through this round. There we go. Easy. There we go. And Rupert just came to say hello right at the end. Yes.
I got